The year was 2019, and I was living in the heart of downtown Portland, Oregon. A place where coffee shops outnumbered the people, and the streets were filled with creative energy that seemed to seep into every corner of life. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have told you my life was as perfect as anyone could imagine. I had a stable job as a marketing consultant at a growing tech firm, a beautiful apartment with sweeping views of the Willamette River, and a girlfriend, Claire, who was everything I had ever hoped for. When we first met, it felt like fate. We were introduced at a mutual friend's birthday party, and despite being surrounded by dozens of people, it was as if we were the only two in the room. She was smart, funny, and had this way of making everyone around her feel at ease. She was gorgeous, too, but in a way that didn't demand attention. She wasn't flashy, but every guy in the room noticed her. We clicked almost immediately, and after a few weeks of casual dates, we became inseparable. I knew early on that Claire was the one I wanted to spend my life with. She had a quiet confidence about her, and her laugh was the kind of laugh that could make you forget about the stress of your day. Our relationship had this easy rhythm. We spent weekends hiking in the Columbia River Gorge, grabbed coffee on lazy Sundays, and had nights where we'd just sit on the couch and talk about everything and nothing. It was simple, and I didn't need anything more. Our friends always joked about how we were the perfect couple. We rarely argued, and when we did, it was over something trivial, like what movie to watch on a Friday night. We had that kind of relationship that others envied, or at least that's what I thought. Claire was supportive of my career, and I cheered her on as she navigated her own path in interior design. It was a balance that felt right, a partnership. Then, everything changed. It started subtly. I was working late one night, just finishing up a project for a big client, when I noticed Claire's behavior shifting. She'd been on her phone a lot more than usual. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone had their own things, right? But then it became a pattern. Texting and scrolling through social media when we were supposed to be relaxing together. It wasn't like her at all. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. I wasn't the type to accuse someone without reason. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach that something was off. Still, I pushed it aside. Maybe it was just work stress, or maybe she was planning something special for our anniversary. I convinced myself it was nothing. One Friday, after another long week, we were supposed to go out to dinner. Claire had suggested a new spot, a trendy rooftop bar with great views of the city. I was looking forward to it, but as I walked into the living room to get ready, I saw her sitting on the couch, her face lit up by the glow of her phone. She was smiling, but there was something different in her expression. A smile that didn't seem entirely genuine. "Hey, ready to go?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She glanced up, almost startled, then quickly put her phone face down on the coffee table. "Yeah, just a second," she replied, standing up and brushing her hair out of her face. It was a small thing, but it stuck with me. Felt like she was hiding something. That night, as we made our way to the bar, the air between us felt strangely heavy. We talked about everything: work, plans for the weekend, the usual small talk. But there was a distance, a slight coolness in her voice, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. By the time we sat down at our table, I had already started wondering if I was overthinking things. But the feeling didn't go away. Over the next few days, I began to notice more oddities. Claire was texting someone frequently, and I couldn't help but catch a few names that seemed familiar. One of them was Ryan, a guy from her past who I'd heard about before. She'd always talked about him in passing, saying they were just friends. But there was something about the way she said his name that made me uneasy. I told myself it was nothing. Ryan was just a friend, after all. But as the days went by, I started to feel like I was losing her in small, invisible ways. Our time together felt shorter, our conversations less meaningful. I couldn't ignore the change. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Saturday, and Claire had gone out with some friends to celebrate one of her co-workers' birthdays. I had plans to meet up with some guys for drinks, so we both agreed to go our separate ways for the evening. It wasn't unusual for us to have a little space now and then, but when she left the apartment, I felt an unfamiliar sense of discomfort in my chest. After a couple of drinks with my friends, I checked my phone to find a few texts from Claire. The first was a quick, "Hey, I'm out with the girls, having fun. Don't wait up." The second was a bit later. "Ryan just showed up. He's a great guy, you'd love him." I froze when I read it. Ryan. It wasn't that I didn't trust Claire, but the timing felt off. Why had she mentioned him out of nowhere? I didn't think much of it at the time, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this night would be different from the rest. By the time I got home, it was well past midnight. The apartment was dark except for the faint light coming from Claire's bedroom. I knew she'd be asleep, but something made me stop in the hallway outside her door. I could hear voices, muffled, but definitely voices. One of them was Claire's. The other, it sounded like a man's voice. I stood there for a moment, wondering if I should knock or just walk away. But curiosity got the better of me, and I quietly pushed the door open. There, on the bed, was Claire. She was lying on her side, her body pressed up against Ryan's. He was stroking her hair, and she was laughing. But the laughter didn't sound right. It wasn't the kind of laugh I was used to hearing from her. It was softer, more intimate, almost like a whisper. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen. My heart was pounding in my chest, and a wave of dizziness washed over me. It was as if the room was spinning. My mind raced to make sense of what I was seeing, but the more I tried to convince myself that there had to be an explanation, the more the reality of the situation sank in. Claire turned toward me, her eyes widening in shock. "Ryan, I didn't expect you home so soon," she stammered, quickly sitting up and pulling away from him. Her face went pale as she fumbled for words, but I couldn't focus on what she was saying. I could only think one thing. What was going on? Ryan stood up from the bed, his expression unreadable. "I should go," he muttered, grabbing his jacket and walking toward the door. He didn't even look at me as he passed by. Claire was still sitting on the bed, her hands in her lap, avoiding my gaze. "Claire," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What's going on here?" She looked up at me, and for the first time in our relationship, there was no warmth in her eyes, only guilt and panic. I can explain," she said, her voice trembling, but I didn't want to hear any explanations. I didn't know what to say, how to process what had just happened. All I knew was that everything I thought I knew about her, about us, was now in question. And that night, everything changed. The silence that followed Claire's words felt like a punch to the gut. There was a heaviness in the air, something unspoken hanging between us. She fumbled for words, but none of them seemed to make any sense. She kept apologizing, offering explanations, but nothing felt real in that moment. I just stood there, still processing the sight of her with Ryan, trying to make sense of what had just happened. "I never meant for you to find out this way," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. She was sitting on the edge of the bed now, hands wringing in her lap. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. It was as if everything I thought I knew about her, about us, had been ripped away in one single, unexpected moment. "Explain it to me then," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How long has this been going on?" She hesitated, biting her lip, then finally spoke, the words spilling out like a confession she had been holding back for months. "It started when you started working longer hours. I felt alone. Ryan was there for me. He was just a friend at first, but then it became more. I could feel my pulse quicken, my chest tightening. So it wasn't just a one-time thing, not some random mistake. It had been building slowly behind my back, and I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you come to me?" I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. She looked at me, her eyes filled with guilt, but she didn't seem to have an answer. It was clear now that the trust one had built in her over the past year had been shattered. The person I thought I knew, the person I had shared my life with, was no longer the same. I could feel the anger building inside me, but more than that, there was a deep, gnawing sadness that I couldn't shake. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about betrayal, about the things she had kept hidden from me. And it hurt in a way that words couldn't describe. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, her voice cracking. "It was just, I don't know. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to lose you. But you did anyway." I muttered, my heart sinking. The room felt colder now, the distance between us stretching farther than it ever had before. The woman I had trusted was no longer the same. I needed space. I needed to think. I need to be alone for a bit, I said, turning toward the door. I couldn't stand to look at her anymore. Not in that moment. I stepped out of the apartment and into the cool night air, my mind racing. The city seemed quieter than usual, the noise of the streets fading into the background as I tried to process everything. How could this have happened? Was I that blind? Was she always this way, hiding her true feelings, pretending to be someone she wasn't? The questions kept circling, and I had no answers. I walked for what felt like hours, trying to clear my head, but nothing was helping. The truth kept coming back, over and over again, and it was suffocating. By the time I returned to the apartment, I was exhausted, mentally, physically, emotionally. Claire was gone, and all that remained was a note on the kitchen counter. She was staying at a friend's house for a few days to give us both time to think. I didn't know if I needed time to think or if I was just trying to avoid facing the inevitable. But I knew one thing. I couldn't stay here, not with all the memories, not with everything that had just fallen apart. I spent the next few days in a fog, barely able to concentrate on anything. Work was a blur, and my friends noticed the change in me. I wasn't myself anymore. They asked what was going on, but I couldn't bring myself to explain. How could I explain what had happened? How could I tell them that the woman I loved had been hiding something from me, something that had destroyed everything we had? On the third day, Claire came back. She had a sad, tired look on her face, and I could tell she was struggling with her own guilt. We sat down in the living room, neither of us knowing where to begin. She apologized again, and this time, I could hear the sincerity in her voice. But apology didn't change anything. Words didn't change the fact that she had betrayed me, that she had broken my trust in a way I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. I don't know what I'm supposed to do here, Claire, I said, my voice low, tired. You've broken something in me, something that I don't know if I can fix. She didn't respond at first. Instead, she just stared at her hands, as though she was looking for the right words, but they never came. We were both stuck in this limbo, unsure of what came next. I wanted to believe that we could move past it, that we could fix what had been broken, but I wasn't sure how. The truth was, I didn't even know if I wanted to fix it. How could I? How could I trust her again after everything? We spent the next few days talking, but the conversations always seemed to lead to the same place. The betrayal. There was no getting around it. We were both trying to navigate through a minefield of emotions, but every step we took only seemed to lead to more hurt. And with each passing day, it became more and more apparent that the relationship we had once had wasn't the same anymore. I needed clarity. I needed to figure out what was best for me. Was it worth trying to repair this? Or was it time to walk away? Could I ever forgive her for what she had done? Or would this betrayal define everything we had? I decided to take a step back, to spend some time away from Claire and really think about what I wanted. It was a tough decision, but I knew I had to make it. I packed a bag and headed to my parents' house, about an hour outside the city. I needed a change of scenery, a different environment to help clear my head. Being back home wasn't easy. My parents could tell something was off, and they didn't hesitate to ask what was going on. At first, I tried to downplay it, but the more time I spent there, the more I realized how deeply this betrayal had affected me. It wasn't just Claire's actions, it was everything that had built up over the past few months. My job, my relationships, the life I had worked so hard to build. It was all crumbling, and I didn't know how to stop it. It was during one of these quiet evenings at my parents' house that I received a message from Claire. She was asking if we could talk again, to try to work through everything. My heart raced as I read the words, and for a moment, I thought about ignoring it. But I couldn't. There was still a part of me that needed answers, that needed to understand why she had done this. I agreed to meet her the next day. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop in the city, a neutral space where we could talk without the weight of our apartment hanging over us. When I saw her there, sitting at a small table by the window, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, confusion, even a bit of relief. She stood up as I approached, her eyes filled with the same guilt and pain I had seen in her before. "Ryan," she started, but I raised my hand, signaling her to stop. I didn't want to hear another apology, not yet. Not until we could get to the heart of it. "Claire," I said, my voice steady but heavy, "I need you to be honest with me. I need to know why." Her eyes flickered with hesitation, and for a moment, I thought she might back away. But then, she took a deep breath and finally spoke the truth. "I was scared," she said softly. "Scared that you didn't need me anymore. Scared that I wasn't enough for you. And Ryan, I was lonely. I didn't know how to tell you. So, I turned to someone who made me feel wanted, even if it was just for a moment." As she spoke, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me. It wasn't an excuse, not by any means. But it was the truth, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt like I was hearing her for who she really was. We sat there for a while in silence, neither of us knowing where to go from here. The damage had been done. But in that moment I understood something. No matter what happened next, things between us would never be the same. The coffee shop where I met Claire the next day was one of those quaint little spots where the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the hum of quiet conversations. It should have been calming, but nothing about this situation felt calming. Not anymore. Claire's face, still worn from the events that had transpired, told the story of someone who regretted everything. But regret didn't fix things. And the truth, no matter how painful, couldn't undo the betrayal. When she spoke about feeling lonely, about turning to Ryan for comfort, I couldn't help but think about how much I had trusted her, how deeply I had believed in us. I had been blind, consumed by work, and she had been left to fill a void with someone else. Someone who clearly knew how to exploit her insecurities. The reality was sinking in, and it hurt. It wasn't just about the affair. It wasn't just about Ryan. It was about everything, about the erosion of trust, the questions of loyalty, and the emotional distance that had slowly built between us. The problem wasn't just her infidelity. It was the fact that I had been living in a lie, oblivious to everything falling apart around me. "So what now?" I asked, my voice more composed than I felt. "How do we fix this, Claire?" She sighed, running a hand through her hair as she stared down at her coffee cup. The silence between us was thick with tension, both of us searching for answers we weren't sure we could find. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "I wish I had an answer, Ryan. I wish I could just take it all back. But I can't. I know I've hurt you, and I'm sorry. But I don't know if that's enough anymore." Her voice cracked, and I could see her fighting back tears. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to hold her and pretend like things could go back to normal. But another part of me, the part that had been betrayed, that had been forced to question everything, was pulling away, shutting down. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Claire, I need time to figure this out. I can't just pretend everything is fine. I need to know if you're really sorry, or if this is just because you got caught." Claire's eyes widened in shock. "Of course, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, Ryan. I was just lost. I messed up, and I regret it every single day." Her words felt like an echo, hollow and distant. I could tell she meant it, but I couldn't escape the nagging feeling that her apology was too little, too late. She had already crossed a line, one that couldn't easily be erased with a few words. "I need to be alone, Claire," I said, the words leaving my mouth before I could stop them. "I need to think. I need space." She looked like she was about to protest, but I didn't give her the chance. I stood up, grabbing my coat and heading toward the door without another word. The cool air outside hit me like a rush of reality. The city felt colder than usual, like everything around me was closing in. I didn't know where to go, but I couldn't stay in that coffee shop any longer. Claire's words, her presence, they all felt suffocating. I needed time to process everything, but I didn't know how long it would take to come to a decision. Could I forgive her? Could I really move past what she had done? The next few days were a blur. I stayed in my parents' house, pacing through the quiet rooms, trying to make sense of everything. But no matter how much I tried to push it away, The betrayal kept creeping into my mind. I couldn't focus on anything else. Claire kept texting me, calling me, desperate for a chance to explain herself further. I ignored most of it. There was no need for more words, not when I was still reeling from the ones I had already heard. But one night, as I sat alone in the living room, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Ryan. Ryan, hey man, I know things are tough right now, but I think it's time we talk. I stared at the message for a moment, my stomach sinking. I didn't know what to expect from Ryan, but I certainly didn't want to talk to him. The idea of confronting him, of hearing whatever justification he had for what had happened, felt like too much. But I knew it was inevitable. So I replied, Ryan, fine, let's talk. We agreed to meet the following evening at a bar on the edge of town. I showed up early, wanting to have a drink and clear my head before we talked. The bar was quiet, with only a few patrons scattered around. I sat in a booth by the window, staring out at the rain-soaked streets, lost in thought. Ryan arrived shortly after, and I could immediately tell something was different. His posture was stiff, and there was a nervous energy about him. He slid into the booth across from me, avoiding my gaze. Look, Ryan, I started, trying to keep my voice steady. I don't even know why I'm here. You've already done enough damage. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. I know, man. Believe me, I know. And I'm sorry for everything. For what happened with Claire. For crossing that line. But I didn't want it to happen like this. I shook my head, feeling anger bubbling up inside me. You didn't want it to happen? But it did. And now I'm stuck here, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. Ryan's eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time, I saw a genuine look of regret. I never meant to hurt you, Ryan. But the truth is, I've been in love with Claire for a while now. It wasn't just some fling. I never wanted to come between you two. But I couldn't stop myself. His words hit me like a brick. I wasn't sure how to process them. My best friend, the guy I had trusted, had fallen in love with my girlfriend. And I had no idea. You're telling me this now? I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. After everything that's happened, now you're going to tell me this? Ryan looked down at his hands, clearly ashamed. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I wanted you to hear it from me, not from Claire. She deserves better than this. You both do. I sat back in my seat, my mind spinning. The man I had considered a friend had betrayed me in the worst possible way. And Claire, well, Claire had been caught in the middle, just as confused and lost as I was. I didn't know who to blame anymore, or if there was anyone to blame at all. The conversation between Ryan and me didn't go much further. It was clear that both of us were broken, but in different ways. Ryan had confessed his love for Claire, and I had no idea how to process that information. I couldn't even look at him the same way anymore. He wasn't just the guy I had trusted. He was the one who had taken something from me that I could never get back. I left the bar feeling emptier than I had in days. I didn't know where to go from here. Could I ever trust Ryan again? Could I ever forgive him? Could I even forgive Claire? The more I thought about it, the more I realized something. I had no control over what they did, but I had complete control over what happened next. The decision was mine, and for the first time in a long time, I knew I had to take my power back. This wasn't just about Claire or Ryan. This was about me. I had to figure out who I was without them, what my life looked like without the lies and the betrayal. The next few weeks were tough. I moved out of the apartment, taking only what I could carry. I needed space and I needed to find myself again. But I also knew one thing. I couldn't go back. Not to the life I had before. The life with Claire, with Ryan. That life was gone. As I sat in my new apartment, staring out at the city below, I realized that this was just the beginning. The ending of one chapter was the beginning of another. And this time I was going to write it for myself. The days after that night with Ryan were a blur, as if time was moving faster than I could process. I stayed in my new apartment, trying to find some sense of normalcy in the chaos that had become my life. But the truth was I was stuck. Stuck in a place where I couldn't escape the betrayal of two people I thought I could trust. Claire had texted me a few times, asking if we could talk, if I would come back to our old place. But I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face her, to hear her apologies and explanations that didn't seem to matter anymore. I had to focus on myself, on figuring out what I needed. Then, a week later, things took a turn I hadn't seen coming. It was a Saturday afternoon when I got a message. The text from Claire was simple. "I need to see you. Please. It's important." My first instinct was to ignore it. I had moved on, or at least I was trying to. But I knew deep down that there was no way to move forward without addressing everything once and for all. The fact that Claire was reaching out again meant that she was still struggling with whatever was left unsaid. I took a deep breath and agreed to meet her. The place we chose was a small, quiet park on the outskirts of town, somewhere peaceful where we could talk without the distractions of city life. When I arrived, I saw Claire sitting on a bench near the fountain. Her head was down, and her posture was tense, like she was waiting for something, waiting for me. I felt a knot tighten in my chest as I approached her, but I wasn't sure what emotion it was. Anger? Sadness? Or something else entirely. She looked up when she saw me, her eyes red-rimmed, as if she had been crying. But there was something else in her eyes too, desperation, maybe, or fear. "Ryan," she said softly, standing up as I reached the bench. "I've been thinking about everything, and I don't know how to fix this, but I need you to know something." I crossed my arms, trying to remain calm, but my heart was racing. I wasn't sure what to expect from her this time, but I knew I couldn't trust her completely. Not yet. "Go ahead," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Claire took a deep breath and, for the first time, her voice seemed to crack with vulnerability. "I've been seeing a therapist. I needed help understanding why I did what I did, and why I kept pushing you away. It wasn't about you, Ryan. It was never about you. It was about me." Couldn't help but scoff. "So, you're telling me that all of this, everything that happened, is because of something you were dealing with? It doesn't work like that, Claire. You made a choice, and now we're both stuck in this mess." Her face faltered, the weight of my words clearly hitting her. She took another step forward, almost pleading. I know I made a choice, but it's not just about me or just about you. It's about us, Ryan. I wanted to fix things before they got to this point. I never meant to hurt you this much, but what I've learned in therapy is that my actions, my insecurities, they were bigger than me. I stayed silent, letting her words wash over me, though they didn't bring the comfort she clearly hoped for. There was still too much pain, too much damage, for me to just let go of. I had loved her. I had trusted her. And now, I was left trying to make sense of how it all unraveled. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did," I said, my voice hardening. "I don't even know if I can trust you again. How do you expect me to just forget about everything? To just move on?" She looked down at the ground, her hands wringing in front of her. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't even expect you to forgive me at all. But I need you to understand that I'm working on myself. I'm trying to get better, Ryan. Not just for us, but for me. I need to be better. And I want to be better for you. If you'll ever give me that chance." For a moment, everything was still. The wind was calm, the only sound the soft trickle of water from the fountain. And in that moment, I realized something that shocked me. I wasn't sure I wanted to give her that chance. I had spent so much of my life trying to fix things, trying to make things work. I had tried to be understanding, to give Claire the benefit of the doubt. But what about me? What about my own healing, my own need for closure? I didn't know if I could keep fighting for someone who had betrayed me so deeply. "I need time," I said, the words feeling heavier than I wanted them to. "I can't just give you what you want right now. You've hurt me too much, and I don't know if I can trust you again. I'm sorry, but that's where I am." Claire's face fell, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. But for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for saying what I needed to say. She nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. "I understand. I really do. And I'll give you space, Ryan. But please know that I'm doing this for us, for you, for everything we had."
"I'm sorry."
As she turned to walk away, I felt something inside me shift. I didn't know what the future held, or if I could ever get past this. But in that moment, I knew I had to put myself first. I had to focus on my own healing, my own growth. And Claire? She had to do the same. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions. I avoided seeing Claire, even though we texted occasionally, keeping the communication minimal. I couldn't stand the thought of being in the same room as her without the constant weight of betrayal hanging over us. I knew that I wasn't ready to rebuild our relationship. But I also knew I couldn't keep living like this, stuck in this limbo of pain and confusion. I threw myself into work, focusing on the things I could control. My career began to take off, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of something. But no matter how busy I got, there was always that nagging feeling that I was leaving something unfinished, something unresolved. And then, the moment I had been dreading arrived. I was out for a run one evening when I spotted Claire across the street. She was walking down the sidewalk, talking to a friend, laughing as if nothing had happened. I stopped in my tracks, my heart skipping a beat. There she was, looking just like she did before everything fell apart. But as I watched her, something changed inside me. The anger and betrayal that had once consumed me started to fade. I had been so focused on her actions, on what she had done to me, that I hadn't taken the time to think about my own healing, my own growth. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. I continued running, pushing myself harder than I ever had before. I didn't need Claire's validation or anyone else's. I needed to find peace within myself. I didn't know what the future held for Claire and me. Maybe we would find a way back to each other. Maybe we wouldn't. But for the first time since everything happened, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. I was ready to move forward. After the night in the park, I thought things might start to settle down, that maybe the quiet would give me the clarity I needed. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. The peace I'd tried so hard to find quickly faded, replaced by a whirlwind of emotions and confusion. It wasn't long before I got another message from Claire. This time, there was no apology, no pleading. It was simple, direct, almost like a challenge. I'm done waiting. I need you to make a decision. I'm done being stuck. I wasn't sure how to respond. It felt like she was trying to force me into something. Either forgive her or let it go entirely. Part of me wanted to lash out, to tell her I wasn't ready to move on, to tell her I didn't know what I wanted. But another part of me felt suffocated. I couldn't keep living in this state of uncertainty. I had to make a choice. So I agreed to meet her again. This time we decided to meet at my place, one last time to figure out what to do next. I didn't know if I was ready for it, but I knew we couldn't keep going like this, living in this limbo of unresolved feelings. The night of our meeting, I sat on the couch, my mind racing. What was I supposed to say to her? What was the right thing to do? The clock ticked on, and just before I thought I might lose my nerve, Claire walked in. She looked different this time. Her eyes were clear, no sign of tears, but there was a steeliness in her expression I hadn't seen before. She wasn't the same woman who had apologized and begged for forgiveness. There was something about her now, something that made me realize she wasn't just asking for forgiveness anymore. She was demanding it. I'm done waiting for you to decide, Ryan, she said, her voice sharp, cutting through the thick silence between us. I need to know if we have a future together. I've been doing the work. I've been going to therapy. I'm changing. I need you to see that. I stared at her for a long moment, trying to figure out what to say. The woman standing in front of me was different from the one I thought I knew. She had always been so open, so vulnerable, and yet now she was hiding something. Something more than just guilt. I know you want me to forgive you, Claire, I said slowly, the weight of the words sinking in. But forgiveness isn't something you can just ask for. It's not something I can just give you because you think you deserve it. You've betrayed my trust, and that's not something I can easily forget. Claire flinched at my words, but she didn't back down. I know I've hurt you, and I'll never be able to take that back. But you need to decide if you want to move forward with me or not. I'm not going to beg anymore. I need to know where we stand. There it was, the ultimatum. I could feel the pressure building in the room, the intensity of the decision hanging between us. I wasn't sure what to do. Could I forgive her? Could I move past everything that had happened, everything I had seen? Claire, I don't know if I can, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I want to believe in us, I really do, but everything has changed. I don't know if we can go back to what we had. Her face softened, and she took a step toward me, her voice softer now. I'm not asking for the past. I'm asking for the future, Ryan. I'm asking for a chance to rebuild what we had. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that I can be better. I looked at her, and for a moment, everything seemed to fade away. The betrayal, the hurt, the months of confusion. They all disappeared, and I saw Claire for who she was in that moment. She wasn't just the woman who had hurt me. She was also the woman who was trying to change. And maybe, just maybe, I could give her a chance to do that. But then, something shifted inside me. A cold realization hit me like a slap in the face. I wasn't making this decision because I wanted to fix us. I was making it because I was scared. Scared of being alone. Scared of the unknown. I don't know what to do, I said, running my hands through my hair, the weight of the decision crashing down on me. I'm afraid that if I say yes, I'll only end up hurting myself more. And if I say no, I'll lose you forever. Claire reached out, her hand trembling as she placed it on mine. You're not going to lose me, Ryan. Not if you give us a chance. I need you to trust me again. The silence that followed was deafening. I wanted to trust her. I wanted to believe that things could be different, that we could start fresh and leave the past behind us. But there was still a part of me, deep down, that wasn't ready to let go of the anger and the betrayal. And that was when it happened. The doorbell rang. I froze, unsure of what to do. Who could it be? Claire and I exchanged a confused look, but before either of us could move, the door swung open. And there he was, Ryan. He didn't look surprised to see Claire standing there. If anything, he seemed like he had expected it. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, his eyes cold and unreadable. Ryan, I said, my voice sharp. What are you doing here? Ryan stepped inside, his gaze flickering between me and Claire. I'm here to talk, he said, his tone cool, controlled. And this time, I'm not leaving until we settle this once and for all. I could feel the tension rise between the three of us. The room had grown smaller, the air thicker. The past few weeks had been nothing but questions and confusion. But now the answers were right in front of me. Ryan and Claire, together and yet so far apart. What do you want, Ryan? I asked, my voice barely containing the anger that was bubbling up. You've already done enough. You don't get to come in here and dictate anything now. Ryan looked at me, unflinching. I'm not here to fight, Ryan. I'm here to take responsibility. I know what I did was wrong, but I'm not leaving until we all face the truth. No more lies. No more hiding. I looked at Claire, then back at Ryan. The truth. The truth. It was the one thing we hadn't been able to talk about. The one thing that had remained unspoken between the three of us. And now it seemed like it was finally time to face it. But as I looked at them both, I realized something else. This moment, this confrontation, wasn't just about me. It wasn't just about Claire or Ryan. It was about all of us facing the reality of what had happened. And that meant accepting the pain, the betrayal, and the loss. But could I face it? Could I really let go of everything we had and start over with nothing? The air was thick with tension. The stakes had never been higher, and the decisions we made in the next few moments would change everything. The moment Ryan walked in, the atmosphere shifted from tense to unbearable. My body tensed, my mind racing to process what was happening. This wasn't how I imagined this conversation would go. I thought it was supposed to be between Claire and me, a chance to figure out where we stood. But now Ryan, the man who had betrayed me, was standing in my living room, acting like he had a say in what happened next. I could feel the blood rushing to my head, the anger bubbling up inside me. Claire looked as shocked as I felt, her mouth opening and closing like she didn't know what to say. Ryan stood there, quiet, letting the silence fill the room. I could almost feel the weight of the choices that had led us to this moment, hanging like a thick fog between us. His eyes were steady, but there was something about him that felt almost too calm, too calculated. He wasn't here for a casual conversation. He was here to take control. "I think it's time we all face what's been happening," Ryan said, his voice steady and cold. "We've danced around this for long enough." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Face what exactly, Ryan?" I shot back, my voice sharp. "You already took what you wanted. There's nothing more to say." Ryan's eyes flickered to Claire, then back at me. "It's not that simple, man. I know you're angry, but we've all been playing games, hiding things. You, me, Claire. We're all complicit in this mess." Claire flinched, her eyes darting between us, but she didn't say anything. This was the moment when everything would either collapse or somehow start to heal. Ryan stepped forward, his posture firm as he approached me. "You think I wanted this to happen? You think I wanted to hurt you? I was your friend. But I can't ignore what I feel anymore. It's not just about Claire. It's about us. About all the lies we've been telling ourselves." I shook my head, the words coming out before I could stop them. "This is insane, Ryan. You're sitting here telling me that all of this, everything that's happened, was somehow my fault too." My voice rose with every word. "You slept with my girlfriend, and now you're trying to make it about us being complicit?" Ryan didn't back down. His eyes met mine without flinching. "I'm not saying it's your fault, but we've all been running from the truth, from what's been going on behind the scenes." His words hit like a punch, and for a moment, I was paralyzed. Claire, who had been silent until now, took a step forward, her voice barely a whisper. "Ryan's right. We've been pretending, all of us, but I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of being this version of myself. I want to change. I need to change. But I need you to see that." The room was spinning, my emotions going wild. This wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about everything that had been building underneath. The lies, the fears, the self-doubt that had been silently poisoning everything between us. Claire wasn't just asking for forgiveness. She was asking for redemption. And Ryan wasn't just trying to make amends. He was trying to justify his own actions. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to blame anymore. I had spent so much time focusing on what Claire did and how she had betrayed me. But now, as I looked at both of them, Claire, the woman I had loved, and Ryan, the man who had been my friend, I realized something that made my stomach drop. I had been just as complicit as they had. I had buried myself in my career, distracted by everything around me, too blind to see the cracks forming in my own relationship. "I don't know how to do this," I said, my voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can forgive either of you." Claire's eyes filled with tears as she stepped closer to me. "Ryan, please. I know I've hurt you. I can't change what happened, but I want to change for the future. I need you to see that. I need you to see me, not as the woman who betrayed you, but as the woman who wants to be better." Her words trembled as she spoke, but there was a fire behind them, a desperation, a need to make things right. Ryan shifted his weight, standing next to Claire. "We're both here, man. We're not running anymore. We need to face the truth, all of it, or none of us are ever going to move on. This has to be the turning point, Ryan. For all of us." The words hit me like a wave. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It wasn't just about who did what and when. It was about the bigger picture, the things we hadn't been able to face, the fear, the insecurity, the broken trust. And no matter how much I wanted to walk away from this, to leave it all behind, I knew that the only way to truly heal was to face it head-on. For the first time, I took a deep breath and looked at Claire and Ryan. Not as the people who had hurt me, but as the people who were trying, in their own way, to confront the mess they had made. And I realized something. I couldn't move forward until I understood myself, until I understood what I needed. "I don't know what's next," I said, my voice raw. "But I can't keep living in this limbo. I need to figure out who I am without you. Without this. I need to rebuild my own life, whether or not you're a part of it." Claire's face crumpled, and Ryan's expression hardened. I wasn't sure if they understood, but I knew that this was something I had to do for myself. I needed to step away and take the time to heal, separate from the anger, the hurt, the expectations. "Do what you need to do, Ryan," Claire said softly, her voice trembling. "But I'm here when you're ready, if you ever are." Ryan's voice was steady but filled with regret.
"I am sorry, Mom.
"I never wanted things to get this far. But I'm here too, whenever you're ready to talk." I nodded, taking a step back, needing the space between us. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more confusing than the last. But in the middle of the chaos, there was one truth that stood clear. I wasn't the same person I had been when I walked into this room, and neither were they. We were all broken in different ways. But maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward something better. Not just for Claire, not just for Ryan, but for me. I had to find my own path, my own way forward. I turned and walked out the door, leaving behind the pain, the confusion, and the betrayal. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing for sure. It was time to stop hiding. Time to stop pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. This was the beginning of something new, and I was ready for it. The days after the confrontation felt like a blur. Each one dragged on, filled with the weight of decisions that hadn't been made, questions that hadn't been answered. But as much as I wanted to run from it all, I couldn't escape the reality of what was happening. I had walked out that night, thinking I was leaving behind the chaos, the hurt. But the truth was I was still stuck. Stuck between the past I couldn't let go of and the future I didn't know how to build. I kept thinking about what Claire had said in the park. How she wanted to change. How she wanted me to give her a chance. And gnawed at me day and night. I wasn't sure if I could believe her. I wasn't sure if I could trust her again. But the longer I stayed away, the more I realized that I couldn't stay stuck forever. I had spent too many years building a life with someone, only for it to be torn apart. I had given so much of myself to Claire, and in return, she had betrayed me. But wasn't there more to this than just the affair? Wasn't it also about my own choices, my own role in the relationship falling apart? And then, the phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something inside me told me it was important. It had to be. I hesitated for a moment before picking up. "Ryan." The voice on the other end was clear, calm, but with an edge of urgency. "It's me, Claire." I froze. The sound of her voice, even after everything that had happened, still had the power to send a rush of emotions through me. I had been avoiding her, pushing her away. But now, hearing her speak to me like this, I couldn't ignore the tension in the air. The stakes were rising again. "What's going on, Claire?" I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. "Why are you calling me?" She paused for a long moment, and I could hear the faint sounds of her breathing, as if she was choosing her words carefully. "I know you're probably angry, and you have every right to be," she started, her voice cracking just slightly. "But something's happened, and I need you to hear me out. I need to explain." I felt my stomach tighten. The uncertainty from the past few weeks was starting to close in around me again, like a noose tightening ever so slightly. "Explain what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. But deep down, I knew this conversation was coming. I just didn't know what to expect. "Ryan, it's about Ryan." She said it slowly, carefully, as if every word mattered. I found out something about him, something I wasn't supposed to, and I need you to know what's happening. I need you to hear me." The mention of Ryan made my blood run cold. I hadn't spoken to him since the night he walked into my apartment, and honestly, I didn't want to. But now Claire was calling me with something about him? My heart rate spiked, my mind already racing with all the possible explanations. "I don't want to hear about him, Claire," I said, my voice low, my jaw clenched. "I don't want to hear about anything that involves him right now. I need to focus on what's happening with us, not with him." She wasn't having it, though. "You don't understand," she pressed, her voice almost pleading. "It's important. What I found out. It changes everything." The words hung in the air like a ticking time bomb. I could feel the walls closing in, the rising tension threatening to swallow me whole. I wanted to shut it all out. I wanted to tell her that we had already said everything we needed to say, that nothing she said could fix what had been broken. But there was a part of me, a part that still wasn't ready to let go. that wanted to hear it, whatever it was. "I'm listening," I said, finally giving in, my curiosity getting the better of me. Claire exhaled deeply. "I didn't know this at first," she began, her voice steady now, but there was a rawness beneath the calm. "But after everything happened, I started digging. I found out that Ryan didn't just—" She paused again, as if she was finding it hard to get the words out. "He wasn't just after me. He's been after you too, Ryan." I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Ryan wasn't just trying to win me over. He's been trying to sabotage everything between us. He wanted you out of the picture. He didn't just want me, he wanted everything. Our relationship, our life. He wanted to take it all." The shock hit me like a jolt of electricity. My mind reeled as I tried to process what Claire had just said. Ryan, my best friend, hadn't just betrayed me. He had been planning this all along. Everything that had happened, every moment of confusion, every ounce of pain. It wasn't just an affair. It was a carefully constructed plot. A plan to ruin everything. "You're lying," I said, the words almost coming out before I could stop them. "You have to be. Why would he do that? Why would he try to ruin our lives?" Claire's voice was quiet now, almost a whisper. "I found messages. I found texts. He's been planning this. He knew exactly what he was doing. And when he saw how far I had fallen for him, he thought he could take everything. I didn't know what he was really after, but now I see it." The words felt like a punch in the stomach. Couldn't breathe. The weight of it all was too much to take in. Ryan hadn't just been a passive participant in the affair. He had been the architect of my destruction. He had been waiting for this moment, for me to fall apart, so he could swoop in and take over. Suddenly, everything clicked. The late-night conversations. The way Ryan had acted when we spoke in the bar. The way he had made excuses for his behavior. It wasn't just an affair. It was a manipulation, a carefully calculated move to ruin me, to take what was mine. I felt a surge of anger that was so intense it almost choked me. "I can't believe this," I said, my voice shaking. "I trusted him. I stopped, running a hand over my face. How could I have been so blind?" "I didn't know either, Ryan," Claire said softly. "But now you do, and I need you to understand something. We can't let him win. We have to stop him before he does even more damage." I let her words sink in. The stakes had just reached a new level. It wasn't just about forgiveness anymore. It was about survival. About stopping Ryan from destroying what little was left. It wasn't just a betrayal of our relationship. It was a full-out assault on everything I had built. "I won't let him get away with this," I said, my voice cold now. "Not anymore." And with that, everything changed. I wasn't just dealing with a broken relationship. I wasn't just trying to heal from the betrayal. I was preparing for war. And this time, I wouldn't be the one losing. The tension in my chest was almost unbearable as I hung up the phone. Claire's revelation echoed in my mind, each word growing louder, heavier. Ryan had been playing me all along, manipulating not just Claire, but me too. The realization that the man I considered my best friend had schemed to destroy my life was too much to process. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a calculated, ruthless attack. I had no idea how long I sat there, the weight of it all crashing over me. Everything I thought I knew was shattered. The woman I loved, the friend I trusted. They had both lied to me, and worse, they had been working together in ways I couldn't even fathom. I snapped out of my stupor when the sound of a knock at the door cut through the silence. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But deep down, I knew who it was. Claire. I stood up, my body tense, and opened the door. She was standing there, her face pale and her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "I had to come," she said, her voice soft. "I couldn't just leave things the way they were." She hesitated, looking at me as if unsure of what to say next. I stepped aside to let her in, the anger still simmering inside me but now mixed with a cold determination. I had to get answers, and I wasn't going to wait for Ryan to make the first move. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the couch. "We need to talk." Claire sat down slowly, wringing her hands in her lap. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the weight of everything she had done sitting heavily on her shoulders. But I wasn't interested in hearing more apologies. Not yet. I needed to know the full truth. You said Ryan's been after everything, not just you. What exactly does that mean? I asked, my voice tight with controlled anger. Claire swallowed hard, looking away for a moment before meeting my gaze. He didn't just want me, Ryan, she began. He wanted your life, everything you had. He's been playing us both for months, manipulating everything from behind the scenes. I felt my chest tighten. How could you not see this? How could you not realize what was happening? I don't know, she whispered, the guilt heavy in her voice. I was so caught up in everything, in the moment. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to believe it. You're telling me he used you, I said, my voice shaking with fury. And you let him? Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. I didn't know, Ryan. I didn't know what he was doing until it was too late, until I found the messages, the plans. I found out that he was setting us up for this. He wanted you gone. He wanted to take everything you had. I felt the ground shift beneath me. The betrayal was no longer just between Claire and me. It was between me and Ryan. The man I had called my best friend, the man I had trusted above all others, had been plotting against me. And I had been blind to it. I can't believe this, I muttered, my hands curling into fists. I trusted him, Claire. I trusted both of you. I know, Ryan. And I'm so sorry, Claire said, her voice barely a whisper. But I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay when I knew what was really happening. For the first time, I looked at Claire without the anger clouding my judgment. She wasn't just the woman who had betrayed me. She was someone who had been manipulated just as much as I had. Ryan had played us both, and it sickened me to think how far he was willing to go to destroy us. I need to find him, I said, standing up, the determination flooding through me now. I need to confront him. This ends tonight. Claire's eyes widened, and she stood up quickly, grabbing my arm. Don't do this, Ryan. Don't let him win. He's already gotten so much control over us, over you. You can't let him do this. I wrenched my arm free, a sense of urgency overwhelming me. He's already won, Claire. He's taken everything. And I'm not going to sit here and let him walk away unscathed. I can't let this go on any longer. Claire stepped back, a look of helplessness crossing her face. I know, but please think about this. Don't let him pull us back into this mess. We can't keep playing his game. The words hit me hard. Claire was right, but Ryan had gone too far. I had no choice now. I couldn't let him get away with everything he had done. I'll do what I need to do, Claire, I said, my voice steady now. This is bigger than both of us. I stormed out the door, the cold air hitting me like a slap in the face. My mind raced as I made my way to Ryan's apartment. I didn't know what I would say to him, what I would do once I saw him face to face. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't walking away without getting answers. The ride felt like an eternity. The car swerved around corners, my mind too clouded with rage to focus on anything else. The truth of everything that had happened settled in, becoming clearer with every passing second. Ryan had planned it all. The affair, the manipulation, the deceit. It was all a part of a bigger game. When I pulled up outside Ryan's apartment, I could feel the weight of the moment. This was it. This was the confrontation I had been avoiding. But now, I had no choice but to face it. I didn't hesitate. I walked up to his door, my fist pounding against it before I could stop myself. The door swung open, and there he was. Ryan, the man I thought I knew, the man who had ruined everything. He looked at me for a moment, his eyes narrowing. What do you want, Ryan? He asked, his voice cold, guarded. I want to know what the hell you've been doing. I spat, my hands clenched at my sides. I want to know why you've been lying to me, why you've been tearing apart everything we had. Ryan didn't flinch. He just stared at me for a long moment, almost as if he were considering something. Then, finally, he stepped back, letting me in. You really want to know? He asked, his voice low. You really want the truth? I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know what I expected, but I was ready for whatever was coming. I needed to hear it, to understand what had driven Ryan to betray me in such a calculated way. Ryan took a deep breath, his eyes locking with mine. It was never about Claire, Ryan. It was about you. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. And just like that, the last pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The air between Ryan and me felt suffocating. Every word he spoke dug deeper into the wound he'd already carved into my life. I stood in his apartment, my fists clenched, trying to comprehend what he had just said. It was never about Claire. It was about you. I took a step back, the weight of his words almost knocking the wind out of me. All this time, I had been so focused on the betrayal from Claire, on the hurt she had caused. But now I was realizing that Ryan wasn't just a passive participant. He had orchestrated this whole thing, manipulated both of us in a twisted game that I was too blind to see. He watched me closely, as if waiting for my reaction, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. I had no idea what I was supposed to say. Part of me wanted to yell, to demand why he had done this. But another part of me was simply numb, the realization hitting me like a cold slap in the face. Ryan leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. You think I did all of this because I wanted Claire? That's what you've been thinking all along, right? That I was after her? No, Ryan, he said, his voice low. I was after you. I've been jealous of you for a long time. Your life, your success, the way people look at you. It ate me alive. And when I saw how much Claire needed you, how much you meant to her, I realized that I could never have what you had. So I decided to take it. I stared at him, my mind trying to catch up with the words he was saying. You're insane, I finally muttered. You've ruined everything. You think that's going to make you feel better? Ryan smirked, a cold, bitter smile that only fueled my anger. It's not about feeling better, Ryan. It's about taking control. I wanted to bring you down to my level, to show you that I could have what you have, even if I had to destroy everything around you to get it. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. Everything had changed so drastically. The man who had been my friend, the person I had trusted above all others, had spent months plotting my downfall. And the worst part? He had succeeded. But there was something inside me that still refused to be defeated. Even after all the lies, the manipulation, and the betrayal, I couldn't let Ryan have the final victory. I couldn't let him walk away thinking he had won. You've already taken enough, I said, my voice gaining strength. But you won't take my peace. Not anymore. I'm done letting you control my life. Ryan's smile faltered for just a moment, and in that split second, I saw the cracks in his facade. But it was too late. The damage had been done, and there was no going back for either of us. I've already lost everything, I continued, my eyes hardening. But I'm not going to lose myself in this mess. I'm moving on, Ryan. You can stay here, consumed by your jealousy and anger, but I'm done. The finality in my voice seemed to hit him harder than I expected. For a brief moment, I saw regret flash across his face, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He didn't say anything else. He just stood there, silent, as I walked past him and out of his apartment, leaving behind the wreckage of what had once been a friendship. The days that followed were a blur. I went through the motions, trying to piece together my life after everything that had happened. It was hard, harder than anything I had ever done. But as the days passed, I started to feel a shift inside me. It was as if the weight that had been pressing down on me for so long was finally lifting, and with each passing moment, I felt stronger. I stopped looking for answers from Claire. I realized that I didn't need her approval or validation to move on. I didn't need anyone else to define who I was or what I could become. The road ahead was mine to walk, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was walking it for myself. I saw Claire one last time. She reached out to me, asking if we could talk, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. Not until I was sure I could face her without the lingering anger, without the pain of betrayal clouding everything we might have been. Maybe one day we could find a way to be in each other's lives again, but not now. Not after everything that had happened. As the weeks turned into months, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into my work, into the things that made me feel alive. I reconnected with old friends, built new relationships, and slowly, I began to find my peace. It wasn't easy, and there were days when the memories of what had happened threatened to drag me under. But with time, the weight of the past started to feel less heavy. I learned a lot through all of this. I learned that trust isn't something that can be given freely, it's earned, and it can be lost in an instant. I learned that sometimes, the people you trust the most can be the ones who hurt you the deepest. But most importantly, I learned that I had the power to choose my own path, to define my own future, and that no one else could take that from me. As I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, looking out at the city below, I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. The storm had passed, and while the scars from the past would always be there, I was ready to move forward. I had made it through the worst of it, and now the future was mine. And as for Ryan, I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he ever learned the lessons he needed to, or if he continued down the path of destruction he had set for himself. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to be part of that anymore. I had chosen my own path, and that was all that mattered. The final moments of this chapter of my life were filled with clarity. I was no longer the man consumed by the lies and the betrayal. I was someone new, someone stronger. And as I closed the door behind me, I knew that the future was waiting for me. One that I would walk into with my head held high, free from the past. If you've been following along with this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for future videos. Thanks for watching, and remember, no matter how dark it gets, there's always a way out. You just have to keep moving forward.